And welcome back to week 7 of the LEC Spring Split, where we just saw a massive upset as SK Gaming took down the first place G2 Esports. Before we get into our next match, though, we do need to award the key up player of the game. It's not self-made. For the first time in a long time, Crownshot picks up 47% of the votes. He was, in fact, tied with Werlib at 47%, and he won by less than 33 additional votes. Congratulations to SK as well as Crownshot. Now let's move on to our next game, which is a monumental battle in the race for playoffs, as Schalke 04 will be taking on Splyce. These are two teams that are looking to bounce back after some tough weeks. And I mean, Frost, this is one of the most pivotal matches in the day because of the playoff race. And with SK just picking up a surprise win, these two teams could fall behind SK.
That was the reality of the situation, is that a lot of people were looking at Fnatic, SK, and Misfits, and kind of one of these teams is going to be the killer of the other two. But with Schalke and Splyce both kind of sitting in the rut and in a slump, combine the two words.
There you go.
They're starting to slide down the standings. And at this point, if you're watching this from like a Fnatic lens, you're like, okay, which one's the weak zebra here that I'm going to pick off?
And of course, if you're watching it from a Fnatic lens, you're very tilted. G2 just lost. Now, SK have stepped up. But listen, we'll get to that matchup later. Let's turn our attention a little bit to Schalke. Of course, this is a team that came out swinging, really, really impressed for the first few weeks, and now's really, really sucked for the last few weeks.
Yeah, that is the story of Schalke, unfortunately. And I think a lot of it has come down to this team just making individual errors and not being able to actually pull the trigger. Because when I look at this team, they do a lot of things right. I think they're good at putting down vision, knowing where the enemy team is on the map inside of the fog of war. But then you have these compositions that they're just not actually using to go in. And you're having, individuals like Ignar, Memento making these mistakes that make it so that when you do want to force fight, you just can't because someone's got picked off and died.
And for me, it's kind of back to basics for Schalke and kind of figuring out the formula that worked for them. And number one, it's unlocking Ignar. Now, Ezreal's a big pick for them simply because not only is Upset a phenomenal Ezreal player, but it means that you don't need to babysit him. Ignar can actually be unlocked from the lane and he can roam around and start getting plays to happen. Then you need a Memento on a high-impact jungler to team up with Ignar, and then make sure Upset has something to hyperscale with, because you're against Splyce, chances are you're going late.
Okay, I love this. You've already drawn some comparisons on what Schalke needed to fix to take on Splyce. Splyce, 2 wins, 5 losses in their last 7 games. I have the same question, but I'm going to throw this one to Frost. What does Splyce have to work on? Because they were more reliable at picking up wins. They do not suck quite as bad as Schalke in recent weeks, but their style is simply not as successful. And you can see in the stats, you can see in their win-loss column, they are not picking up the same advantages or the same Nexus kills they were earlier this spring.
The dirty word for Splyce right now is 1-3-1. So far that they've shown that they can play the team fights because they have clutch team fighters, which makes them such a strong late-game team. And then they can play the early game because Xerxes is so powerful and play that 1-4. But their ability to spread out and eat up an entire map is what's causing them a lot of fumbles. I think it comes from the inexperience of Humanoid and Norscaran. These guys have really high ceilings on them, but they just need the experience, the time on the map to figure out how they sink in and what the correct way to play League of Legends is, where they need to be, where they're placing the vision, how they're setting up picks. These guys get lost in the mid game, and they're not being as impactful as some of the other veteran support mid lane combos that we have in the LEC.
Yeah, and I mean, where I get concerned for this roster is when I look at Splyce over the course of the split, right? They did better earlier, they're doing worse now. I actually don't think I've seen much improvement at all. I think earlier on, when they were picking up wins, they still lacked some key components that you just brought up. But it worked because the other teams around them actually hadn't gotten to the point where they can overcome, Splyce's very weak mid game. Now they really need to kick it into gear because it's getting to the point where it's almost too late for this team.
It is do or die. There are 2.5 weeks of the regular season left before playoffs, and both of these teams are in desperate need of a win as they fight to keep their playoff spots. Let's see who comes out on top today.
Thank you very much, Quickshot and the analysts. I'm looking forward to this game, I have to admit. It's very spicy in terms of playoff contention, both these teams sitting at that 7 and 6 scoreline.
From a League of Legends perspective, I don't know if I'm the most excited.
Okay, so here's the thing.
No, hang on.
Okay.
I have a point.
Okay.
But from a stat... So the reason why it might not seem exciting on paper is because you look at Schalke, you look at Splyce, both these teams have been struggling in recent weeks. And you're like, is that really a fun match to watch?
Yes.
However, it is, because I'm confident today that Memento and Ignar are going to return to form. Yesterday, I feel like we saw glimpses of it, even though Schalke ultimately weren't able to play around their win condition of trying to get the LeBlanc ahead. And then, for Splyce, you know that Xerxes is one of the best early game junglers in the league. So, what I'm hoping today is that we actually see a lot of early game jungle action, and this will largely come down to the draft. Will we see Xerxes continue to prioritize things like the Nocturne? And if he does, will we actually see him set up plays in the early game compared to what we saw yesterday where we didn't really get to see anything from?
I mean, I'll be honest, Vedius, if both these teams play badly and it's a bit of fiesta, I'm looking forward to that as well. I love a bit of a fiesta on summer.
I mean, but I feel like in Europe, we rarely have fiestas these days. They just kind of slow the game down rather than just kill each other all
that's
the time.
true. We need Origin back. Origin Rockat, the Teleclown Wars that we had in the good old days. We are going to pick some bands. Schalke on the blue, Splyce on the red. Schalke haven't had a win in their last 4 games. And here they decide we're going to get rid of some of those picks that Xerxes might be good on. The Carter's taken away. LeBlanc removed from Humanoid, and Lucian and Jace are the bans from the side of Splyce.
So the respect ban for the LeBlanc is because Zeus actually does a really good job of getting Humanoid ahead. The problem is he tends to struggle to leverage his lead once he gets to the mid game. So I don't know if the LeBlanc ban was really necessary, but they still show that respect. The Lissandra ban also coming out towards Abadage I think is a great one. We've seen in recent weeks that he has also been underperforming, and he's like one of the highest death leaders for mid laners in Europe. So the fact that that's going to be taken off the board means that he's going to be forced to play something else that perhaps can be punished. But Schalke, they're going to prioritize that Silas. No real surprise. It's been heavily picked here in Europe. And I'm surprised it's left open so often, considering its record, even though it's already received another loss today. I still feel like as a champion, he's very strong. He can be flexed all over the shop. Speaking of flex pick, Splyce immediately going to answer with a flex of their own.
Yeah, Jarvan just seems to be must-pick first rotation either side at the moment. So flexible, you can take him jungle. Have seen him in the top lane, and not probably in the mid, but support is a very rare possibility that has happened over in Korea. Alongside that, the Galio, a very strong support pick these days.
So I really like what Splyce is doing, because the Galio can be flexed both mid and bot. But what we're potentially seeing is Jarvan in the hands of Xerxes, Galio in the hands of Norskeren. Really strong playmakers, not only in terms of the early game, but really strong team fighters as well. And the thing about Splyce is, while their mid game is very questionable, they make a lot of mistakes, they get caught out a lot. If they just guarantee these already strong team fighters, it means that they have that late game insurance, which, to be fair, they've proven multiple times that they still have good enough players that they can win out on these late game fights.
They definitely have. Kobe, so consistent for Splyce across the course of his career with the team. It's been with the team ever since it got into the LEC as well. Ezreal picked up here for Upset. That's one of his signature champions. Played it 7 times already this split. Alongside that, you take the Tarm Kench for a bit of safety. Ignar not going to be on a playmaker today.
So Schalke going back more towards their 1-3-1 style that they played a lot at the beginning of the split, usually leaving Odoamne on an island. He would typically just kind of win or go even in lane. If you discount yesterday, he's had a pretty solid performance in the 1 versus 1. And he, right now, could be looking at grabbing that Silas for himself, but I'm really liking this Splyce draft, if I'm being honest. I feel like that it plays very much towards how they have won in the past. The analyst desk talked a lot about going back to their identity and kind of talking about how this team can find wins, and you're now seeing Rise being picked into the Silas. That can be picked both top and mid. Spoke to Amazing, he says it's a really good matchup. You scale well in a side. Because of the prison, you can kind of lock him down, and who cares if he steals your Rise ultimate? What's he gonna do? Yeah. So yeah, I think so far Splyce have a very solid draft to answer a lot of what Schalke's doing.
Going to see some AD carry bans coming out here from Schalke as well. Sivir taken away. I'd like to see them... I'm trying to think what Kobe is being really strong on this split. He's played basically a mix of everything. The Jinx is something...
He's got a really deep pool.
Jinx is something I mean, always associate with him.
Kai'Sa is the first one that comes to mind. Yeah. Just because I think it's a really good pick into the Ezreal. You could go for a Draven, but I think it's really hard to snowball. It looks like Schalke have the same read that I do. Vayne is the other one. If you really want to go like late game, strong duelist, good answer into something like an Ezreal, Vayne, yeah, really good pick. And it is something that Kobe has played in the past. I don't know if he's played much this split, though.
Hasn't played it yet this split, but we have, as you say, seen it from him in the past. I think we saw it in playoffs in summer, if I recall correctly. Rek'Sai was the ban. Tristana, though, still on the cart. A very strong AD carry on the current patch, and that will be locked in for Kobe, leaving a probable top lane counter pick left for Splyce.
Yes, looks like it. Because again, they can flex pretty much everything. You know that the Galio is going to go into the support position at this point, which doesn't really come as much of a surprise. So I'm not a massive fan of the cannon pick here, just because now this to me, if I'm Splyce, I would lock in the Jarvan for top. I would run him airy, and we saw when Wonder played into the cannon matchup, it actually does really, really well. It's really difficult for the cannon to have any kind of kill pressure, and you can just farm pretty safely in the laning phase. It does kind of fit into the 1-3-1 style. What they want now is just a bit of engage somewhere, because they're kind of lacking that initiation tool, so the Sejuani fits that role comfortably. I think for Splyce, if it goes the way that what I'm expecting, then I think they can just go for a jungle pick here. With Nocturne being banned, something like an Olaf perhaps wouldn't be optimal. Maybe they just pick a safe top laner instead.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you go top,
because you're kind of limited
the Jarvan into jungle. You take someone safe that can scale up.
Ooh.
Cho'Gath is going to be the pick for Chachi in that top lane.
This is like a...
It's an old school threat.
Yeah, old school comp for sure. Like a lot of area of effect, a lot of crowd control, a lot of reliance on the Tristan to be the primary damage dealer in these team fights, but you have a lot of wombo combo potential for Splyce. And they can kind of match, they can very much set up the 1-4. It's funny because to me this feels very much like what I was hearing from Amazing earlier in the day. He wasn't on the analyst desk, but his opinion was very strongly around, if you're going to play 1-4, then just stick to it. If you're don't try and draft a 1-3-1 if you can't execute upon it properly. Just commit to the 1-4, and which is what they've done, and they still have strong late game team fighting as well.
So I want to expound a little bit more upon that. Like, how does a 1-4 really differ in terms of team style and team play style than from a 1-3-1? Because to me, it just seems like where you just put one of the people that's in the 4 into a different lane.
So we can probably talk a little bit more about it in-game, but it's a pretty large concept.
Okay, well, I will make sure to come back to it in-game.
For argument's sake, just believe me.
No, 100% I believe you, Ben. 100% I believe you. I just think it's good to discuss these sorts of things. We'll talk about it a little bit more in-game.
Speaking of 1-4s and 1-3-1s, Schalke have drafted 1-3-1. This basically means they will send a Kennen and the Silas off onto 2 separate side lanes later on to the game. They do have strong scaling, and it's going to be difficult for Splyce to handle them, but Ryze should be able to hold his own against the Silas. But again, if both the Kennen and the Silas get ahead, Cho'Gath is really going to struggle to deal with that Kennen off on a side lane later on. But in any case, win conditions seem pretty clear to me. Splyce want to fight, Schalke want to split up the map. Can Schalke get their solo laners ahead in the early game? Can Splyce successfully stall and not fall too far behind, and maybe even shut down some of these split pushes?
Well, that is what we keep our eyes on. A massive game for both these two teams. Schalke up against Splyce, but sitting at 7-6 in our standings. And I always, when you get to this portion of the split, you know, we've only got 5 games left for all of these teams. You have to start looking at who teams are playing up against later, who teams have already played up against, how many of those easy games you've gone past, how many teams you have still ahead of you that you have to play. And I think when you look at that, for Schalke, it actually looks like it's a relatively easy road for them. They've got XL left, they've got Rogue left, 2 guaranteed, in inverted commas, wins. They don't have to play G2. They've got Misfits who aren't on the best run of form. They've got Origin who've looked a little bit shaky as well.
For sure. Schalke still have a very solid strength of schedule, and I think that if they get a win over Splyce, it kind of it separates them from the pack that's very quickly closing in around them. But you kind of compare that to Splyce's strength of schedule, and you can see that their path is a little bit tougher. They have to go up against all of the teams that are kind of on the rise and pretty much all around them as well. And G2, they're going to be going up against next week, who are obviously going to be very annoyed after this week. And we've seen what happened to G2 when they come back after a deficit. They look very, very scary. They still have to get through Schalke today. And even though Schalke have struggled, they're still considered a strong team. And there's the Fnatic game that they're going to have to play, which is very, very difficult. And especially SK as well, getting a big win today. Like, Splyce definitely have a tough road ahead of them. So if they can grab this win today, it means that there's more room for errors later on. And it gives a little bit more opportunity if you do happen to drop a game against one of the stronger teams.
Especially since they lost against Schalke last time they played as well. So if Schalke win here, they would have the head-to-head. That means if the teams were tied at the end of the split, Schalke would be put above Splyce in the standings. But that's enough about playoff information. Let's have a look at the jungle pathing from the start of this game. You can see Memento actually going up towards the top side quite early. He's got that Scuttle Crab, went red into Scuttle now. Maybe trying to put Chachi behind on this Cho'Gath. A level 2 dive is not unheard of, but I think Memento will just decide for the Krugs instead. Norscarin with the taunt onto Ignar. That explosive shot doing a huge amount of work onto him, and Kobe on this Tristana off to a good start.
Level 2 really strong with the Tristana Galio. The all-in power is very, very scary. I was a little concerned about the Tom Kench pick, but I think it really does fit into the whole idea of being able to play towards side lanes because of what his ultimate can do. It offers that extra bit of mobility, and we do know that Ignar loves to roam whenever he sees an opportunity to. And obviously Upset and his Ezreal is something you always have to respect, one of his favorite champions. So I feel they definitely have comfort, and it makes sense in the comp, but in terms of the 2v2, it's definitely a rough matchup, and if you make one misstep, you can very quickly lose your life, especially given the Ezreal doesn't have the heal. He can't provide that extra assistance for the Tahm Kench in the event that he does get caught by a taunt or a knock-up from the Galley.
Memento was able to steal away one of Xerxes' camps here. Xerxes is going to realize that in just a second, so Memento has a very slight advantage. And as Xerxes paths up towards the top side, we do have to look at this Kennen pick from Odawane. He's running the Klepto in this game.
And I want to quickly just put into the minds of people's heads AD Kennen, only because when I think about late game, the thing about Cho'Gath is in a side lane, because of how just naturally tanky he gets, it's really difficult for an AP Kennen to kind of threaten the side.
You can't burst him.
Yeah, so what's actually better is to go AD, because the thing about Cho'Gath is once you start landing autos, especially on things like a Blade of the Ruin King, it's very easy to chase him and run him down, because all of his crowd control abilities are very slow, they're very telegraphed, and if they land, they're obviously very impactful, but the drawback is that they're quite difficult to land. So I think AD Kennen could be a thing this game, and they already have enough AP damage with the Silas anyway. So it is a possibility, just want to introduce that. But also the Kleptomancy, it makes a lot of sense into tank matchups where the tank can't really do anything, it gets regularly freely harassed.
Right, if you have called it out, we will call you Nostradamus, Vedius the Predictor. Xerxes was spotted here by Amadage, so it's not the sneakiest gank in the world. We have seen that both these supports actually roam with their junglers quite often throughout the course of the split. Norscarin and Ignar try to make plays for their team, and don't really expect Ignar to be able to do that too much this game on the Tahm Kench, much more about how Norscarin will facilitate his mid lane.
When there's a will, there's a way.
That's true.
And the thing about Ignar is he definitely doesn't like convention. His performance hasn't been the best in recent weeks. I feel like he's made a couple of questionable plays, and but overall, I do feel like respect towards him is very high. And I was one of the people coming into this split that was like, I don't know how people can put Ignar as a top 3 support. He had a really bad year on BBQ. I feel like his champion pool is really limited, especially when the Ardent Sensor Mesa existed and he just refused to play those champions, and I was skeptical, but I do feel this split he showcased that he is still a very talented support, one of the best in Europe, and he wants to try and help Schalke secure a top spot at the end of the split. So we'll see if he can pull it off.
Memento was looking for a gank there towards the middle lane, has got a control ward in the bush, but actually dodges away from Chachi's vision here. I wonder if Chachi is aware that Memento is around. Obviously aware of the possibility, but hasn't spotted him out yet. Odo, looks like he's going towards the AP Kennen route.
Yeah.
He's got the Hextech Revolver.
Yeah, it's sad. I was really hoping for the AD Kennen.
Yeah, I was thinking
really
about
good
it
in
as
the
well.
side lane, but it does reduce your team fighting power, and maybe Schalke still want to have that option. But now we see the gank coming in from Memento.
Slicing mass from Hughes. Chachi stunned up underneath the tower though, and Chachi uses the flash to get away.
So typically, you'll max the Feral Scream, the W, on the Cho'Gath, because the silence duration, you'll want the lower cooldown, and I believe the silence duration increases per level as well. But basically having it is really useful, especially in ganks, because the moment people charge in, you silence them and then they can't follow up with any crowd control. So really good, especially against ability-reliant champions like the Kennen and the Sejuani. So I like the pick overall. The sustain it has is really good in the matchup as well. And the Merc treads that he's already picked up on his first base mean it's going to be tough to kill indeed.
I think Splyce have just, they've gone to some sort of shoe shop recently, because first item completed boots on Kobe as well, trying to crack out the Yeezys or something, showing off.
So given that it is a very, it's probably going to be a pretty slow early game, Sejuani not the strongest ganker, she doesn't have that many lanes to play around outside of maybe top. Little fun story for you.
Oh, here we go.
I used to be a Cho'Gath mid one trick.
That does not surprise me in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, there was a period of time where I only played that champion because of how strong it was. Like, I don't think people appreciate how powerful a silence is against some AP champions. And one of my favorite matchups was Cassio, because if she landed Q and then ran towards you, silence her, and she can't do anything. And then you chase her down with the E, and then you knock her up, and then you eat her. Cho'Gath mid, one of the best counters to Zed as well.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And given that he was buffed on this patch and he's solo queue players at home, if you want a good counter to him, go for that Cho'Gath. Get a Rod of Ages early, get that AP in. You can also go for an early Zhonya's, doesn't matter. AP ratios are insane on Cho'Gath. And yeah, really, really strong mid. Obviously, he's not been going AP this game, but there was a
hope as well.
There was no hope that he was going to AP this game.
I did look it up. Feral Scream does scale the silence scales with levels. Yeah.
Did you doubt me?
It's a 1/10 of a second each level that you put into it, and he's not maxing at the moment. He's maxing Vorpal spikes for the wave clear. He's putting points into the E, which makes sense as well.
Yeah. I thought that you would max the W just into this matchup because it's really good against ability users and it helps with the poke. But yeah, I have seen Emax was not super uncommon, especially when Cho'Gath was like really, really popular. When he was like first pick and ban. The Emax was the usual go-to because it does help with the wave clear and it's very useful like sticking to targets as well.
So for the moment, both teams seem to just be pretty happy scaling up, starting to get these first bits of items, first completed items in across the board. And I think coming out of pick and ban, when we talked about the win conditions and the style each team's going to play, this is very much to be expected, right? Neither of these teams really need to accelerate an early game lead into a late game. They both have good scaling.
Yeah.
Both teams will be happy just starting to get towards a 1-3, starting to get towards a 1-4.
So this could be an opportunity to talk about the differences between 1-3 and 1-4.
That's what I set you up for, but it's your choice,
So the basics are, in terms of the difference between a 1-3 and a 1-4 is, when you play a 1-4, you play on 2 lanes. When you play a 1-3-1, you play on 3 lanes.
That makes sense.
And Splyce's issue is that they would often draft 1-3-1 comps where 2 champions would be really good in a 1v1 or 1v2 situation, and they would put that champion with like the Ezreal in the mid lane.
Okay.
And so all that would end up happening is you wouldn't generate pressure anywhere on one side lane, and they wouldn't have enough pressure on top side. Speaking of top side pressure, Schalke have actually sent 3 members up towards this top lane.
But Norscaron's roamed all the way up from bot lane as well. Memento gets the stun. Norscaron trying to get enraged for the hero's entrance. He'll keep Chachi quite tanky. Gets the double knock onto Abadachi, who has to flash away. Chachi's still under the tower. Odo is quite low as well. The Cataclysm comes out from Xerxes, chases Memento off. The flash use. Abadage now caught underneath the tower. Chachi almost gets taken out with his own ultimate, but will get it in the end. Odoamne running away here. The Realm Warp is used from Humanoid, but Splyce answered the Schalke dive incredibly well.
Yeah, beautiful response from Splyce, and Chachi is showcasing his Cho'Gath skills. Very rarely do you get to make that comment, but he buys enough time for the rest of his team to show up. But while all that has been happening, Schalke have continued to push towards the bot side of the map. Kobe doing what he can to try and hold the line, but Splyce, they find themselves first blood.
And part of it was off Norscaron's roam up towards that top side as well. Got in range for the hero's entrance, made it even harder to dive onto Chachi, and Splyce just had a read on Schalke here.
So there's actually no vision here from the side of Splyce, but because they get spotted from the cone, they recognize this is happening, and it actually takes them a while to set up this dive, and then the ultimate comes out, but the Galio was already making his way up there. Abadage tries to get the ultimate. He's going to set the execute up here, but unfortunately for him, a really good knockup from Chachi buys enough time. The stopwatch then comes out, Abadage then misses the stun, and then another really good knockup. Comes in through Vizichachi, and you think, oh, but the ultimate would have been enough. No, because he gets the heal back from the minions that he was able to kill earlier on. So, honestly, really well played from Vizichachi there. Really good response from the rest of Splyce. And now Abadage, once again, padding out those death stats in the early game.
Carnivore passive coming in for Chachi pretty well there. Teleport used towards the mid lane here by Ignar. Just wants to get back towards his team as quickly as possible. We'll try and clear out some vision here. Norscaron takes a little bit of chip damage from Upset, but not too much. The Ezreal going Iceborne Gauntlet first with that tier stacking up as well.
So I do want to highlight as well, even though Upset is running the Kleptomancy, in the Tristana lane, he's been really struggling to actually get procs, which means that the gold is dead even in the mid lane, or in that bot lane. There's only about 100 difference between the two, and I think that's largely because... Odoamne forced a flash, but he was the other guy that I want to talk about. His Kleptomancy up in the top lane has been where he's been building a lot of his gold advantage towards the top side of the map as well. This is now going to extend a little bit more for Schalke because they're picking up these turret plates. But this is what I mean by Schalke didn't necessarily need to force anything, because when you run the double klepto, you hit those item spikes a little bit sooner, which means that you can then threaten more on a side lane much earlier on than Splyce should have been able to.
And Splyce had moved their bot lane up towards this top side now as well with a teleport from Kobe. Looking for the Rift Herald. Should be an easy enough secure. Abadage maybe looking for a little bit of action, but not going to get anything out of it. Xerxes will get the Rift Herald. You get a couple of towers up towards top. And actually looks like it might even be a 4-man stack from Splyce. The question is, do they use the Rift Herald top? Because that tower's going to fall pretty quickly in the bottom lane. Upset on it already. Yeah. The Rift Herald here will take this out, but I think Splyce have realized they're not going to have the time to put it down and get the charge off. So they give Schalke the first tower, and they just settle for some plates in that top lane.
And Memento are going to trade it for a Mountain Drake towards the bot side of the map as well. But O2 forced to play much more defensively. He's going to be sitting on the back foot, just waiting for this tower to eventually drop. To me, this suggests that Splyce actually have their focus on using the Rift Herald in the mid lane. Silas does have decent wave clear, especially with the Q-Max. However, he's not going to be able to do much against a Rift Herald that's sieging onto his face, and especially when you pair that up with a Tristana, then the siege from Splyce is going to be very, very strong.
I do want to give a bit of credit to Splyce for this rotational play, though, because it looked like Upset and Ignite were going to get that bot lane tower anyway. They'd already chipped away a couple of plates because of the Norscare and Roam, and Splyce still managed to get a full 5 plates onto Kobe. So the goal difference between those AD carries could have been really big, and it's actually only about 200, 100 or so. So you have to give some credit to Splyce there, realizing they couldn't make the play bot lane, change it top, and still get those plates out.
Then we give a lot of credit to Splyce. I think they're playing this other game very, very well. Their big win condition is very much about relying on that 5v5, maybe even the 1-4. But when I say 1-4, it's very much just about having Humanoid push out one of the side lanes, which, fun fact, he's doing right now. And he's just going to try and mitigate the Silas. And then what he'll do is he'll push out the wave, and then he can use his Realm Warp to join a fight, or he even has the teleport himself. So he's basically just going to be following Abadage around, as Chachi now could be caught out.
They're going to get stunned up by the Sejuani. Abadage doesn't land the stun, but the Glacial Prison comes out. Chachi already down, and Ignite and Upset join the party to separate the rest of Splyce. Humanoid still pushing in the bottom lane means this is a 3v5, and you can see Memento coming down, maybe trying to catch out Humanoid in that bottom lane. He has a lot of movement speed, doesn't have the ultimate, of course, as he just used it. Odo traded with Humanoid. Xerxes on his way down here as well, but he's gone over Vision. And Splyce unable to react to that too much. Didn't get that much damage from the tower in the bottom lane, didn't really get that much in the mid either.
But Vizichachi, he ends up losing his life, and unfortunately for him, this is something that happens pretty regularly. He gets caught out a surprising amount, especially last week. He was one of the, well, I mean, he was sick for one day, so he was sick last week, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but definitely so far this split, he just seems to be in random places, either trying to get vision or trying to set up for a play. But if we actually look at the state of the map, he thinks I'm okay because I have pressure mid and I have a Jarvan behind me, but the reality is it's way easier for Abadage to get this collapsed, and he's not that tanky this early on. And the Time Kench ultimate actually acts as a really strong zoning tool to prevent Norscarian from providing any support, and he didn't want to commit his ultimate because he thought that he could also lose his life. So big blunder there from Vizichachi, and Schalke find themselves a kill.
So little fun fact for you guys here, Abadage stole the feast and then feasted Vizichachi.
Yes.
So he now has 120 bonus health.
Oh, and you get to keep those,
You get to keep the stacks.
Yes.
So Abadage, if he can continue to steal that ultimate away from Chachi, gets a lot of damage out of it, of course, because strong AP ratio.
Yeah.
And will be able to make himself a little bit more tanky as well.
Ooh, Abadage, don't face check, don't face check. Good. Jarvan, though, he's looking for it.
Spots Abadage out. No one really here down towards the bottom side to react.
The Galio.
It's teleport for Odo, though.
Oh, he's gonna die.
That's what Vedius thinks. Abadage thinks otherwise as he steps away.
Well, that was tense. I was like, surely he's going to die here.
I'll be honest, I was nowhere near as tense as you seem to be. Fight erupting in the mid lane a little bit as Upset jumps forward onto Chachi here. Has the Iceborne Gauntlet, it's very hard for the Cho'Gath actually to catch out the Ezreal now.
Sorry, that's seriously slide and glide. It was like, he threw his javelin out and it went at an awkward angle, and then he was like, whoa!
But pops the Rift Herald mid here.
Kennen in the top lane as well. Aha, the split push is beginning to happen, and Splyce trying to leverage this, so here we are, the 1-4. This is what we're talking about. Ryze now sits in a bot lane, trying to generate pressure. He has the ultimate to join if he needs to, and Splyce are technically at 5-man right now, which forces Odoamne to come down and help the rest of his team. But fortunately for them, Schalke, they actually just, even with only 3 people, postured what's the word, very aggressively, very far forward, to basically say, you know what, Splyce, we're not going to allow you to approach the wave, which means that they didn't actually have a big enough minion wave to secure the tower, so Odoamne makes his way back up towards the top side. But that was a perfect example of both teams trying to play towards their comps. But also you can see how good the Ryze is in a side lane at keeping control of Abadage. So Schalke don't just have full control over the entirety of the map. They actually only have control of the side that the Ryze isn't in. Which means that Odoamne is going to be trying to avoid him and just slowly chip away at these towers.
Seems to be working okay for Schalke at the moment. About 1,200 gold lead here for them. You've got the Ezreal sitting at 2 items. You've got Rod of Ages already stacking up on Abadage as well. Odo finished that proto belt, building up towards wherever he wants to go next. Across the board, though, Splyce in a very good position as well. Like 1,000 gold at this point of the game isn't too monumental at all. And so we'll have to continue to see exactly how these two teams want to play around. It seems like mid is their focus predominantly. Especially for Splyce, they want to try and crack that mid lane tower with a Mountain Drake up in a few seconds as well. They'll probably want to play around that. Buster shot used from Colby. That's the ultimate out from the Tristana, just a forced upset away.
There's a lot of damage though onto the AD carry just before the Mountain Drake spawns. The bot wave hasn't been pushed out, and while the Ryze is top, no one's actually going to match him, which means he could be forced to TP here. Whereas no one from the side of Schalke. Well, I really want to see the Ryze actually start to move down. Unless Splyce have just decided, you know what, we'll give up this Mountain Drake and we'll instead just focus on getting vision towards top side, and we'll start getting rid of chip damage onto this tier 2.
Deep vision is Baron's about to spawn as well.
Yeah, but they're not just going to rush the Baron down, do you know what I mean? And it could just be a setup to make it harder for Odoamne to split push. Especially when there's nothing really to play for on the bot side. Remember that they haven't even taken the tier 1 in the top lane as well, so Splyce, I think, just accepting the fact that they don't want to try and 5v5 at this point. And so they decide to make the trade for vision, and they have pretty good vision setup right now.
Chachi once again caught out here by Ignar and Upset though. The knockup lands, Upset with the chase, Exhaust comes out, Chachi has the flash to jump across this wall, trying to hold it for as long as possible, will use it in the end. And Schalke once again find the catch.
So I had stats ping me the number of isolated deaths. But we don't have time because there's a fight in the top lane.
Odoamne caught underneath the tower, gets a 1-for-1 trade, but Humanoid and Xerxes are the ones to try and force the fight.
So they actually attack one of the side lanes and successfully find a kill onto Odoamne, but he does a great job of trading it back. Now the Ryze, actually, rather than push his advantage, is being forced to base because they're afraid of Izachachi in this 1v1 against Abadage, who he could actually look for a dive here.
Possibly. Doesn't have a stopwatch, which is always a little bit tricky. Teleport coming in behind him as well. This is Splyce joining the party. Humanoid on his way, Ignar on his way as well, but Ignar no ultimate, no teleport from the Ezreal either. Abadage needs to put on his fancy feet. Rooted up, but Ignar and Memento have the flank position now. Norsgaren in range for the ultimate if he's going to join that fight. But nothing actually comes out of it. The teleport, a little bit of a waste there from Humanoid.
A little? No, it was a complete waste. He actually achieved nothing, and all he does is force Schalke to base. So not entirely sure why he invested that teleport if they weren't willing to commit to it. But let's have a look at how this play happens. Use the round walk to bring in Xerxes. Odoamne very quick to use his ultimate. Doesn't have the stopwatch available, which means that he ends up losing his life, but fortunately for him, towers do a lot of damage now. And that was enough to help trade a 1-for-1 at the very least. Does cost him his flash, though, which means he's going to be a little less impactful in these fights. But note how he has gone for an early Void Staff, like that against all the magic resistance that you're seeing on the side of Splyce. Very quick fun fact, if you're sitting at around 80 magic resistance, then it's worth getting a Void Staff. That is the point at which you should try and buy.
Yeah, if the enemies on average.
Enemies, yes. If you have 80, it doesn't matter. But
don't penetrate your own magic. Do you just see the Mio mana completed on the Ezreal now, so that second tier is going to start stacking up for himself. Humanoid's finished both of his double scaling items, except Rod of Ages has a couple of minutes left before it's fully stacked. 2 items on Corby as well. That Tristana, you have to watch out for her. I've played a lot of AR, and she's very strong in that mode, so I assume she's pretty good on Summoner's Rift as well.
True, very, very true. We're also seeing how strong the Ryze is in a side lane. This is why I really like the pick. I think he does well into both Silas and the Cannon. He's now a whole level ahead of both of them, and he's just generating a lot of pressure on a side lane. You can see how far ahead he is in terms of the farm. He's even built himself up a 550 gold bounty. He has the fully stacked tier, now the Archangels, and the Rod of Ages very close to being fully stacked as well. So Humanoid looking very, very strong.
Yep.
And it's all about this other side lane that Splyce have to be careful of because they don't really have anyone to deal with the Silas or the cannon.
I mean, would there ever be a point that the Cho'Gath can deal with them? Is there ever a point where he's just too tanky for them to actually work their way through?
He will be able to deal with the cannon because the cannon will never be able to one-shot you. I don't think he'll ever be able to deal with the Silas because the moment Silas, I think, completes Void Staff, he's just too consistent at team fighting that you can't really do anything.
This game was looking for the flash engage, instead going to go in with the hero's entrance. Ignar flashes away. Xerxes popped his ult there as well, but no Summoner's Burn on the side of Splyce, whereas Ignar had to use a flash for himself.
Just trying to generate some pressure as the good ulti.
Buffers the jump though, that's something you can do on the Tristana. Looks like Chachi's trading on the top side as well as Upset forces Norskamen away. Chachi just trying to keep Abadage around, who does use his own flash there. Oh, respecting Humanoid with the Realm Warp.
Yep.
Interesting that Chachi doesn't have the flash at the moment. His Cleanse Teleport on that unsealed spellbook.
Yeah, it's because he used his flash earlier when he got picked off from the bot side jungle.
I do.
So forced to change to the cleanse now is pretty good against the amount of CC that Schalke does have. But yeah, also Abadage being forced to use his flash is really bad when he's the one that wants to generate pressure on a side lane. So
sneaky.
This is risky.
Very risky, but if you get it, you finally manage to open up that mid lane.
Spidey senses are tingling right now for Splyce. They know something's up.
So you got Realm Warp on Humanoid. You've got Splyce getting some vision in the pit. Chachi off towards the side lane, immediately teleports in. 3,000 HP on that Baron. Zerxes jumps in as well. He gets the smite. He steals it away. The slicing Maelstrom will hit onto 3 members, but already Odo is down. Momentum very low as well in the backside of the fight. 2 kills, 3 kills for Splyce. They take the Baron. They take everything away from Schalke. Upset even jumps forward. Maybe a little bit too risky from him. It's a double for Humanoid. Realm warps down towards the bottom lane just to get himself out of dodge. And what a great play from Splyce. Incredible stuff from them. They steal away the Baron. They get 4 kills. And you have to think that Schalke just made a big mistake there. Went for a very sneaky Baron. Spider senses from Splyce were tingling, and immediately they collapsed.
Oh, it's just so painful to watch as we bring up the replay. You've got to look at the decision making. Splyce, I don't know why they're trying to force a Baron in this situation, and you can just see here, Memento in the smite fight versus Xerxes. He jumps over the wall, and you can see the rest of his team right now is just sitting there being like, what's going on? What's going on? What is this? I don't know why they tried to force this Baron. Like, literally, I was just thinking this all the time, Medic. I couldn't understand why they tried to force this play. They're playing this 1-3-1 comp. Their scaling was going fine. The worst case scenario for you is trying to group up in a Baron pit and force a fight, and it ends up like this. Good stuff for Splyce. They're now in a commanding lead. It's very difficult now for Schalke to really threaten on a side lane because Splyce are the ones with the Baron. They have a very strong rise. And now Schalke have just kind of handed the game on a silver platter.
So there's basically nothing you can do. And then you've got Tristana only scaling up in terms of rage. Schalke trying to do something as they catch out Humanoid and Xerxes. Ignar got the flank up with the Abyss of Voyage, but Humanoid flashes away. Upset forced back towards the bottom of the fight, and it's Schalke who make the play, but Splyce who answer back immediately.
Splyce still in a perfectly fine position. The Tristana very close to completing those 3 items. Just slowly sieging onto the base. Note how that top lane has been abandoned. This is the classic 1-4 Medic. They don't really care about that wave. They're just moving between mid-bot. Utilizing this rise to generate pressure and then grouping up with the rise to actually siege onto the turret. But right now they actually have the Tristana in the solo lane.
She's got the rapid fire cannon as well, so all you need to do is step forward, get that one strong auto attack down. You chunk away at the tower so quickly with Tristana if you use your explosive charge. They get the mid lane tower, they now come down towards the bottom side, and Splyce are well in control of this game.
Now, if you, in an ideal world, Splyce would have full vision control over this top side of the jungle, so they would sweep all the vision out, but now Schalke going for a fight.
Odo engages, Hero's Entrance used as well. Stolen away there by Abadage. Xerxes puts them in the Cataclysm though. They still call out Humanoid. There's the counter Hero's Entrance coming out from Norskamen. Upset's done! He's dead! Schalke lose their AD carry, and maybe they're going to lose a lot more than that, because once again they start a fight, and Splyce are the ones who come and knocking at their door. They take him out. It's another kill. The resets for Carby are bound. Ignar in the next to 4, you have to feel. He's done. It's a double for Splyce, and Schalke make the play, but Splyce just blow them away.
Elation on the faces of Splyce as they are on the track to secure a massive win for Schalke, and as the race for playoffs heat up, Splyce will secure another win.
Schalke tried to make play after play, but it was just not their day today. Splyce come knocking at their door. They'll take down these Nexus towers. They'll take the Nexus, and they look Schalke in the eye and say, "We are the superior team today."
Really like the draft from Splyce. I felt like it just played towards their strengths. We saw a really good 1-4. We saw good team fighting. We saw them punish the mistakes of their opposition. And once they had the lead, they knew exactly what to do with it. 26 minutes, 54 seconds. That might be the fastest Splyce game we've ever seen, Medic.
It's quite possible. Not known as a team that plays incredibly quickly. I mean, their average win time is 37 minutes, so it's 10 minutes quicker than their average game time. But you have to look across the pond. You have to look at the other side of the rift, Vedius. Schalke made a litany, a slew of mistakes, a plethora of mistakes this game.
And they're still yet to win a game in the second half of the split now. What are they, 0-4, 0-5?
0-5.
Wow. A devastating second half so far for Schalke after they had such a commanding first half of the split, sitting in that second place spot. I was one of the analysts giving them so much praise, saying that how much they reminded me of the Fnatic from last year. Looked like they could literally do everything, and it just feels like that they've been underperforming. They tried to force so many things, and they end up getting punished every single time.
It's disheartening for them because now they sit equal with SK Gaming at 7-7. They sit only one win ahead of Fnatic, who play later today, only one win ahead of Misfits. Origin are at the same scoreline, but Origin still have a game to play today. And you're looking at Schalke as a team fighting for sixth place
it's
now.
It's almost like every game counts,
It
Medic.
does. Every game counts. Splyce, though, incredibly happy with this, have separated themselves a little bit from that chasing pack. With
They're 8 wins now,
They're
right?
8 and 6 now.
Ooh, so they're like solely in that third place spot.
Origin could catch them if they win today.
Really exciting next couple of weeks, but huge win for Splyce. And again, I cannot reiterate how happy I am to see Splyce just kind of go back to this. Like, yeah, it was a little slow. Yeah, it wasn't the most exciting
That's their
game,
play style.
but I just feel like that it was controlled. I felt like that they picked the right moments. They punished their opposition very well. I feel like that just overall, really great draft, really great play, really great stuff from Splyce.
Yeah, that's exactly what they wanted to do. I think if you look at Splyce in the coming few games, you know, they've got a couple of hard ones, but assuming they can take one win, they're pretty much guaranteed playoffs, because usually about that 9-win scoreline. So you're looking maybe at the Fnatic game, maybe at the Misfits game, maybe at the SK game for a win for them. Key player of the vote is that was
Player
not,
of the game vote.
Yeah, do you want to read it for me?
Is now live at Lolly Esports on Twitter. Your options are Visitachi on Cho'Gath, Xerxes on Jarvan, or Humanoid on Rise. I personally would give it to the Cho'Gath because I think he was a fantastic Cho'Gath player.
Yeah.
I thought he did an excellent job.
Even though he didn't max fail screen.
Even though he didn't max Feral Scream. But still, very, very good. You could give it to Humanoid as well. Xerxes also got the Baron Steel.
Yeah,
so
I mean, you could give it to
you've
any
got
of the
the
three
wealth of
players.
options here.
That's why we give them the three options.
It's up to the fans, really. Enjoy. Have fun with that one.
It's definitely up to the fans. For more on Splyce's win, let's check in with Law and their mid laner.
Thank you, Medic, and thank you, Humanoid, for joining me. Congrats on this victory. I mean, you win on red side, you win under 30 minutes. This isn't something we're used to with Splyce. How come?
I mean, I guess we were tired of going into late game every game, so we just wanted to end it early.
Did you plan it to end this early?
Well, not really, since we have like really outscaling comps, so we kind of wanted to go late again, but yeah, we won some fights, so it was pretty early end this game.
I gotta say, seeing you play over the last few weeks, I felt like you were less confident than you used to. Did you feel this way too?
Yeah, the last few weeks were pretty tough for us, and we didn't play our best. And I think our drafts were not ideal some games, so yeah, it was. And the confidence was like, if you start losing, your confidence goes down as well, so yeah.
What do you tell yourself when this confidence is down, as you say, to pick it up back? Because you were popping off today.
I mean, I just say that we can do this game and we have to win. And if we win, then it will all be good. And no one cares about past losses if we can win this game and go to playoffs.
Absolutely. And you have 2 more weeks to reach playoffs. It's going to be harder for you guys to gain this consistency, because we talked about it with Duke a few weeks back. So what do you guys need now to find finally this consistency to reach playoffs? With the time you have?
I think we just have to play like we did today in the next games. So if we can do that, I think we have a pretty good shot at making playoffs and going pretty far.
So a faster version of Splyce, maybe?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, we'll see if you can make this happening. Thank you for joining me. And we'll send it back to Quick Shot at the desk.
Thank you very much, Lon. Congratulations to Splyce, picking up a monumentally important victory over Schalke, especially when you consider the race for playoffs. I managed to catch up with Broken Shard very briefly, one of the coaches and support staff for SK Gaming, who just took down G2. He started by saying that Schalke 04's comp was poopy. He used a different word. Let's talk about the drafts, because Amazing, you were saying, you know, off air backstage that you actually quite like that both teams' comps kind of fit their identity.
I kind of understood what Schalke was going for. I think they basically wanted to have the 1-3-1 elements continuously in the comp. That's why they, for example, picked the Tom Kench. They had the S04 to basically cover the mid lane, then Silas and Ken on both sides. So actually, I don't think the comp was bad at all. And it actually makes sense to pick Sejani against a team like Splyce, because obviously they are going to trend to 1-4 at some point. So you at least want to have some engagement with your comp. But I do think that Splyce kind of understood their identity even better. And they started 1-4ing at 17 minutes, which basically means that they actually really thought about this and understood, hey, if we just walk down mid lane and they cannot stop us, we're going to win the game.
And it's also the fact that they had so many tools to walk down mid lane confidently, the likes of the Jarvan and the Galio, these high engage options. So you do talk about, you know, like the Sejuani. If Splyce are going to 1-4, you want that long range engage tool to try to punish that or catch out that 4-man unit if you have a numbers advantage. Splyce were thinking the exact same thing, had the late game insurance policy with Kabe on the Tristana, and had the engage tools that when they were ready, they could pull the trigger.
It felt really good that both teams kind of played to their team's strengths, so to speak, and today it was Splyce that came out on top. Let's talk about a few of the plays, though, that helped define the game, starting with that first blood up in the top lane, Vizichachi's Cho'Gath. Initially, the dive looked pretty good from Memento's side, but obviously Vision Reveal gave Vizichachi a lot of time to think.
Yeah, basically, you obviously have a 3 versus 1 situation, but you do not account for the Ryze and Galio to come up. Like, obviously the Ryze was gonna follow up anyway, but the Galio actually comes out of vision completely and then walks up to top lane to basically give enough backup, especially with the ultimate, and turn this dive around.
And the thing was, we were talking before kind of about what are the actual options that Memento have to gank. Like, where is he going to attack on the map? And I don't really know if I fully agree with looking at the top side and saying the dive on the Cho'Gath is the way to go when you didn't have perfect information about where everyone else was on the map.
Yeah, I think if you open up the bot lane first, basically you have the exact opposite scenario coming in for you, because Tom, similar to Galio, also has the ultimate available. So actually you can open up the bot lane first, have Tom roam into mid lane, and then you actually exert the same amount of pressure, if not more, that basically Splyce did in the end. And I think that would have been the better play and the better rotation almost to make that play happen.
So, of course, now as the mid game played out from that first blood up until this next replay, which we'll get to in a moment, the game felt close. The game felt, it felt to me like Schalke were playing the side lanes better as their comp allowed. It felt like Splyce would force a couple plays here or there. The Rift Herald used slightly sub-optimally, so to speak. So, Froskuren, what do you think leads to a decision where Schalke say, let's try sneak a Baron?
I think that they were trying to drive tempo of the game. They felt like they were really strong on the itemization that upset. You know, he was playing very aggressive, very far forward, trying to land all these skill shots. He probably felt very powerful, and he was. And so they move it into the Baron. Now, we discussed this kind of back and forth. It's like, was it the right call to pull the trigger on starting the Baron? Or should there have been more prior setup to try to take small skirmishes or fights around the Baron before doing it?
I'd like Maurice to answer that question when we actually run through this replay and draw some of the attention to specific moments that, stood out in your mind.
I mean, I'm just confused by is basically starting this national. We just had this question. I think even with, and as we see it now, as soon as the darkness fades, Abadage actually had the feast available, so he basically could make the true damage happen. And if you coordinate that with the jungler, that's around 1.6k, 1.7k burst at this point in time, and the whole play actually becomes efficient. But if you do not coordinate it and you're all like on the back foot because you see a Chachi TPing in, also having a feast, and you start panicking, that coordination actually does not make sense anymore and doesn't help them.
And of course, as you mentioned, coordination. Abadage on the Silas had stolen the feast. Not exactly the most traditional, burst combo, and not something you get a huge amount of experience with. You can see that gold graph. It was Schalke in the lead with a 2,000 gold lead until Splyce, in that Alienware replay, getting Baron and then winning the game, Froskuren.
And again, it's just kind of this idea of, Splyce make the clutch plays when it happens. We can levy all the criticisms we want at them in terms of kind of their stalled out mid-game, but when push comes to shove, they do make the teleport play. They get into the Baron pit. They manage to find these smite seals. I believe also, I think there was a jungle level disadvantage there as well. But, you know, the TP came in, they knew that they had the Feast also on their own Shogath, and it just came to who's going to use the Feast Smite combo better here.
And in the end of the day, it was the champion that owns Feast, Vizichachi and Splyce. Look, it's actually Xerxes that ends up winning Key Player of the Game. He gets 43% of the votes. And with Splyce picking up a hugely important win in the standings, we will be taking a look at the playoff checkup with Medic in just a few minutes. Schalke 04 are now on a 5-game losing streak. Froskuren, what do they have to fix in the last 2 weeks of gameplay, knowing how competitive this race is and knowing G2's just dropped the game? So teams like Fnatic are hot on the heels.
The first thing that Amaze and I looked at is why is Ignar on Tom Kench when he had champions like, I'll just throw it out, Blitzcrank available to him? Why not these aggressive supports? And you see a lot of Tom Kench as high priority in the LCK, and I think he can fit into this composition. But like, you're in the LEC, just play the LEC style. When Schalke were on fire, it's because Ignar was making plays and roaming around the map.
I'm always a fan of taking responsibility in some shape or form, especially when I see like I have rookies or players that are not as confident on my teams. For example, last year, obviously, when I came into Schalke, I had the approach, okay, if I screw up, it doesn't matter. I'm a veteran anyway. I can take the criticism. I can take the responsibility. And I want someone on Schalke right now to take that responsibility and to say, okay, I'm going to play the carry champion. I'm going to play this engaged champion. And I'm going to make it happen whether it fails or not. Because right now, they're just playing to lose instead of playing to win.
Yeah, I get that. Playing to not lose the game. It's overly safe. Well, listen, Splyce end up with 8 wins. And after a catastrophic... Well, that's congratulations to Splyce. Fastest win of the split. Well done. Stop. Moving on to the next one. After a catastrophic start to the split, Fnatic have started their comeback run. Their eyes are set on yet another 2-0 week. We'll see if they can pull it off after the break. Oh, almost messed that one up.